Welcome back to the channel. Now today we're going to be exploring a condition that many refer to as the silent killer, and that is hypertension, or in simple terms, high blood pressure. Now I'll explain a bit more about why it's achieved that nickname towards the end of the video, but like many of the conditions that I will discuss on this channel, high blood pressure is one of those things where you won't realize things are going wrong until there is a serious problem. So what is hypertension? It essentially means your blood pressure is too high. Now your blood pressure is the force that your blood puts on the walls of your blood vessels. Blood travels around your body in these vessels. Think of it like a tunnel system. There is only so much space in these vessels, and so pressure is created by the beating of your heart, which works to pump blood to your organs and tissues all around the body so that they can receive nutrients and oxygen. So when you have high blood pressure, this means that the force of the blood against the walls of these blood vessels is simply too high. It's very much like having too much pressure in a water hose. If you have too much pressure in a hose, that can cause the hose to burst or leak. Too much pressure in blood vessels can in turn lead to damage of your blood vessels, your heart, and other organs in the body. Now it's all well and good to know what hypertension is, but why do you need to care? Well, about 47% of Americans have high blood pressure. That is nearly half of their population. In Australia, which is where I live, the number isn't quite so high, but it is about 1/3 of the population, so still significant. Now what these numbers are telling me is that high blood pressure is an extremely common health condition that affects a huge amount of the population. But I want to draw your attention to some other numbers. And these are to do with the fact that hypertension is becoming more common in younger age groups. Several studies have shown this. There was one done very recently in 2021, which found that the amount of young American adults aged 18 to 39 with hypertension had gone from 11% between the years of 1999 to 2000 to 18% in the years of 2015 to 2016. Now that is an increase of about 7% in just 5 years. The American Journal of Pediatrics has published similar results, but looking at a much younger age group. The amount of US adolescents, so those aged 12 to 19 with hypertension, went from 9% in 2001 to 14% in 2015. Again, that is just in 5 years. Now the reason these numbers matter is because it means high blood pressure isn't just something that comes with old age. So it's in everyone's best interests to try and prevent this from happening. Now, in order to prevent something from happening, you first need to understand why it happens. And with hypertension, there are a few things involved. We now know what blood pressure is. It's the pressure that's in your blood vessels. So one of the things that could lead to high blood pressure would be if your blood vessels somehow became more narrow and had less space for blood to move. So how could that happen? There's actually a few ways. One of which is atherosclerosis. Now this is something that I will be doing a separate video on, but essentially this is when you get buildups of cholesterol, fat, or other substances in the walls of your arteries. These buildups narrow the arteries and restrict blood flow, causing high blood pressure along with many other issues. Now another thing is damage to blood vessels. This can happen as a result of diabetes, inflammation, or even high blood pressure itself. And that's because high blood pressure causes walls of blood vessels to become thicker, leading to narrow vessels. And aging. Getting older results in blood vessels becoming more stiff and less flexible. This can make them more at risk of damage and is why blood pressure tends to increase with age. Now your nervous system also plays a part in controlling your blood pressure. It does this by sending messages to the blood vessels. If you're aware of the fight or flight response, you may know that this is controlled by what's called the sympathetic nervous system. This response can get triggered when someone feels stressed or anxious, and one of its effects is narrowing the blood vessels and increasing the heart rate, which will increase blood pressure. Now when this response is overactive, it can cause issues with blood pressure, and this is one of the reasons why stress is a risk factor for hypertension. But the nervous system doesn't work alone. It's very connected to your hormones, and hormonal imbalances also contribute to increased blood pressure. One example of this is with a hormone called aldosterone. Now aldosterone usually gets released when your blood pressure is low. It then tells your kidneys to retain salt and water. This leads to an increase in blood volume, so blood pressure goes up. If this system gets disrupted, aldosterone can then be released even when blood pressure is high and make the situation much worse. Now that is a very condensed version of how high blood pressure can occur. If you guys would like a much more fleshed out version, I can definitely do that, but let me know in the comments if that's something you want. The next thing we need to cover is how high blood pressure gets diagnosed. This one is really easy. You go to your doctor. But what they will do is check your blood pressure using something that looks like this. Blood pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury and will be expressed as two numbers like so. Now the top number is called your systolic blood pressure, and that is the pressure in your arteries at the point when your heart beats and pumps out blood. The bottom number is the diastolic blood pressure, and this is the pressure in your arteries when the heart is at rest between beats. So you would expect this number to be lower than the systolic pressure. The numbers you want to see when checking blood pressure is the systolic, that top number, being 120 or less, and the diastolic, that bottom number, being 80 or less. Now, high blood pressure is usually classified as the systolic pressure being 140 or above. And as that number goes higher, you have different grades of hypertension. So if your systolic pressure is between 120 and 140, your blood pressure is elevated, and it's sort of a wait and see if we can bring that down before you get a diagnosis. But from there, you and your doctor will work together to decide the way forward. It may be lifestyle changes, medications, or a bit of both. And that brings me to the last part of this video. Why is high blood pressure such a problem, and why is it called the silent killer? Well, it's earned this nickname because it usually doesn't have noticeable symptoms. But if left untreated and ignored, it causes serious damage all over your body. High blood pressure puts extra strain on the blood vessels and organs. If blood pressure is high, your heart has to work harder to get blood around the body. This can lead to heart disease later on and cause conditions such as heart failure or strokes. In fact, about 46% of cardiovascular events, so that's things like heart attacks, are due to high blood pressure. That's nearly half. Hypertension also impacts on your kidneys, and that is because there are lots of blood vessels in the kidneys, and hypertension can damage these, leading to kidney damage and even failure over time. Your eyes are also something that are at risk with high blood pressure. Increased pressure can damage the small and sensitive blood vessels in the eyes, leading to vision problems or blindness. And finally, hypertension has been linked with cognitive decline, with research suggesting that hypertension in midlife, so that's between the ages of 40 and 60, increases the risk of dementia later in life. If you think you're too young to need to care about this, you're not. Everyone aged 18 years or older should check their blood pressure at least once every 2 years. So if you don't know what your blood pressure might be, go find out. I don't mean to be all doom and gloom and give all these grim details as if a diagnosis of hypertension is the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. I'm just trying to highlight that it's not an insignificant health condition. It's not something that only becomes important in later life. It's not something that has no consequences on the rest of your health. If you continue to stick with me and learn more about all these health conditions, you'll find that they all tend to link up with each other. Your body is one singular organism. Everything is linked, all the parts talk to each other. So play the long game. Take care of your blood pressure now by living a lifestyle that helps to prevent hypertension and keep blood pressure in check. If you already have hypertension, same thing. It's not too late to try and make changes to reduce it. You could prevent problems occurring later in your life. What changes should you make? That will be covered in my next video. So subscribe and I will see you next week. Please give a like if you learned something or found this video useful. As usual, all the information I used to make this can be found in the description below. And leave a comment if you want any more information on anything. So until next time, keep playing the long game.
Mm-hmm.